All right, you're welcome. I was expecting more to join. Since we posted it on our group chat that the class is starting by 9. But anyways, okay, I think more will join. I think others are joining. Um, so we'll just try and go over some of the codes we worked on last class and then pick it up from there. I'm going to focus on what will help us to complete our project. Remember, our project is to develop a Python code that we can use to set exams, like a quiz, to set quiz for to write an exam for students, for example, or for a quiz, questions and answers, and then we have the options randomized and all of that stuff. Okay, so in our last class, we talked about our import statements, our functions, and then our if statements and all that. So this time around, we're going to pick it up from our functions. We're going to pick it up from our functions. So um, here are our functions. We simply said, as a recap, our functions are meant for branching out code. It's a block of code that you will leave your codes as you are running, you leave the code, you branch out, go and run the function, and then you come back. Okay, so that's what function does. And our functions, we we declare them using the def keyword, and then we call them by typing the name of the function and putting parentheses. So let me quickly just give a simple example. So let's say, for instance, I want to do a function that will add two numbers, for instance. So I'm going to say def, okay? To say def, add numbers. Okay, so that def is the declaration statement for a function. Once you use def, it means you are declaring a function. And then you put the name of the function, add numbers. So after you put your column, you press enter, you can now start typing the code that will run when the function is called. So for example, I declare a variable, so let's say A equals to 3 or B equals to 2. And then I say answer equals to A plus B. Okay, and maybe I say print answer. Okay, so that is a simple function. I use the def keyword to declare the function, and I put the name of the function called add numbers, and then the code that follows. You notice that the code that follows are under the scope of this declaration of the function def keyword here. So to always take notes. So this indent shows that all these codes are under this add numbers function that I declared here. Now, if I run this code, it does nothing. I need to call the function for anything to happen. So how do I call the function? I simply say add numbers like this. Now, when I put add numbers, I must put the parentheses. If I do not put it, I simply call it like this. Okay, it's not the correct way to do it. Let's run it that way and let's see what happens. Now you see what happens. You simply tell me no docstring, def add numbers, nothing is executed. So in order for us to actually see what happens when we run our function, always remember to put your parentheses or your brackets. That is how you actually call your function. So if I run this now, it's going to give me 5. This 5 is 3 plus 2. Now let us make some modifications to this code. Okay, now for the sake of others who may want to view this code, let me just copy and paste so that I do not change what we have done. So for example, I can ask users to input. So I can say int input sorry about that, number for one, for instance. Okay, and this one is going to be int input enter bar 2, right? Okay, so answer A plus B. So this time around, if I run this code, you see it brings up the option for me to add a number. I can put any number of my choice now, 5, number 2, 6, and see it gives me 11. So that also is a function. Now, one of the beautiful thing about functions is that it makes your code to be easy. Let us take a look at that. Let us see what I mean. Now, let me copy this one now. I'm just going to be copying it because most of us are not here, so that I'll be seeing the progression of the code. We want to add another function here now. And the function is to check number, to check if a number that has been entered is actually correct as a number, to ensure that the user entered a number and not something that is a letter or an alphabet. So now for me to do that, right, I need to pass the value. I need to pass a value to the function. And that is what we call the parameters. Okay, I have to pass the parameter here, which is the number. Let me call it n, for instance. I want to check this number that, is it a number? Okay, so I'm going to now say try. I want it to return a number back to me. Okay, I'm going to say try. I'm going to say, before I do that, let me indicate another return number. Let us say checked number is equals to 0. Now, I'm going to say checked number, okay, is equals to int n. So I want to check that whatever the user entered can be converted into a number or an integer. Or rather, let me say floats. We say floats. Now, if there's an error, I'm going to say except. Then this time around, I'm going to say checked number is equals to 0. Can also add a warning. Entered the wrong value. Okay, maybe you'll say wrong value. Okay, so after that, I want to now do something also interesting about functions. If I want the value that the check number is to be returned back to where it's being called from, I'll use the return statement. So I'm going to say return checked number. Okay, so that way with this code now I want to input A or B. So I can simply say, instead of putting all of this input number 1 and all of that, I can simply, instead of this int number here, I can say check number instead. I can say check number equals to this guy and this guy. So it's going to return back. It's going to check no matter what the user entered. It's going to check it using this code. So when I say A equals to check number, input enter number 1, when we put a value, it's going to see that there's a check number here. It's going to now branch from this place, run to this function, okay? And it's going to now execute this, okay? When it finishes executing this, the value that is here is going returning back to this A. Please take note that checked number is not check number. This check number is not this check number. Check number here is the name of the function. So let me run this guy now. So if I run this guy, now it says enter number 1. Now, assuming I entered something that's not a number, you see, it says you entered the wrong value. Okay? And if I entered, you say, get a value. So I don't get an error. Okay. In the same way, I can also pass parameters to this function too. For example, I can pass more than one parameters. Like in this case now, I'm having a plus b. Okay. Def add numbers a plus b. So instead of this check number here, now let me just copy this one out again. Okay, so our code is progressing. All right, cool. Now I'm going to pass two parameters here. Okay, this is going to be let me say A, B. Okay, and then this guy goes away from here. The answer is that. Okay, so all right. So now after having A and B here, now let me make a difference. Let me put X and Y here so that I don't get confused. So X equals to check number, it runs this. Y equals to check number, this runs this. Add numbers. Now add numbers is taking two parameters here. So I'm going to put them here as arguments, X, Y. Okay. So when I put this argument here, it's now going to run these add numbers. Okay, code that is here. All right. So if I run this guy now, I have my enter number 1, 7, or whatever, enter number 2, 9. You see, I have 16. Now, why did I do this? Because I can make this to be more interesting. Okay. For example, I can add an operator. Okay, I can add an operator. So let me do that now. Let me do another function. Let me take this off. Okay. Now, add numbers here. I can add an operator. Let me call it operator here. Okay. Add an operator. And then I can now say, if operator equals to plus, then of course, want it to add two numbers. Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm going to do an elif for this guy. Okay. Sorry. And let's do 4. Okay. So it's going to be an elif. Operator is minus. This will now be A minus B. Another elif. This one is times. Okay. This is A times B. And finally, divide. So this could be A divided by B. Okay, cool. And I can now print answer. Okay, so these add numbers will not work anymore. So I'm going to be say compute operation. Or let me just say compute. Okay. All right. So I'm going to say compute. I'm going to add an operator here. So OP equals to input. We'll say enter operation. Okay. So operation, I can say plus, minus, times, divide. Okay. And so let me take this up so that it comes in between. Okay, cool. Okay, check number, compute OP. Cool. So if I run this guy now, I have enter number 1, 4, operation, times, number 2, 2. I have an 8. So you see, I have modified it and it's easy for me to now add minus, times, or divide. So that is the beauty of functions. Functions makes our life easy so that we can be able to work with codes and we will have our code will be very efficient. We will not have to write too many long lines to do it. So you can remember the calculator assignment that we did. So something like this, we use functions to accomplish it. Now, something that makes functions to be very, very useful is classes and objects. Classes and objects. So let us take a look at Python classes and objects. Okay, here we go. This is part of what understanding OOP means. You see there's OOP here, object-oriented programming language. Python is an object-oriented programming language. What that means is that everything in Python is an object. Object-oriented programming language simply means everything in Python is an object. Okay, so we're going to create a class, and then from the class, we can create several objects. What does this mean? Imagine that you want to build a house. An architect will naturally draw the plan of that house. After the architect has drawn the plan of the house, then the engineer will now be able to construct the house by following the design that the architect has drawn. In the same way, when we create a class, it's like drawing a plan, okay, of a house. It's all called like something like a blueprint. Okay. Now, from that plan that the architect has designed, has drawn, you can build several more houses. Okay, you can build several more houses. So that is the same thing this is doing. Okay, so if you want to create a class, we simply use the word class, and then we say my class, the name of the class. And then from there, we can now create an object of the class. Okay, so let us start with that. Let us see how that goes. So I'm going to come here. Let's start a new one. Let's talk about creating classes. Say classes. So I'm going to say class person. Say class person. Okay. All right. So this is a person class. Okay. And let us create an property there. Name equals to that, for instance. Okay. So that's a simple class that I've created. Now I can now create an object of this class. I can say person equals to person. Okay, so now if I want to get that jotam, I can say print person dot name. Okay, if I run this guy, I'm going to get jotam. You see it now. So you see you see the difference between a class and a function. It's very important to take note of this difference between the class and the function. You see, a class has the object name which you have created. This is the class name, person, and parentheses. Much like functions have parentheses. But when you want to now create or make use of the class, you cannot make use of the class directly. You have to call the person. Okay, let us see, for example, what happens if I do this, for instance, person, name, okay? It will still come up, it will still bring that name so that we can understand. So function does not have that. For instance, I cannot do something like this. Well, this works because you're seeing it as function, as the class here, but just take note that you have to create the object. There is a reason why we create the object, which we see now. You notice that I have name equals to Jota, for instance. What if I need to create a class, and from that class, I want to create different persons. I want to create different persons. Now, I do not need to use a parameter. I don't pass parameter here, much like functions. No, I have to use the init. Okay, I have to use the init to create different variables. Let us see how that works. The init method, this is it. So whenever we're creating a class, we use init to assign values. For example, take a look at this. we say def init, and then we can now pass the parameters to it. But make sure you use the word self. This way, whenever you are creating a class, you must now must not pass these arguments into the class as you are creating it. Let us see how that works. So let me just copy this out now. Let me copy that out. Put that there. Now, this class now, I want to create an init function, def init. Okay. Then I pass self, and then the name. Okay. So we're going to say self dot name is equals to name. Okay. This is self, that is the class self, the name. Okay. The class self has a name, it should be equals to name. So if I now come and say person, let me say person one goes to person, I pass Jotam here. Then I say print person one. Then let me say person two, person three, for instance. Then I say print person two dot name. Now you will see that I can have Jotam and Jane all created from one class. Okay, all created from one class. So this is just how we create this class and we assign different values to it. Now, you can also add functions to this class. Let us say want to, okay, I'm just thinking, let's say this person wants to pay fee, okay, is to pay a fee, for instance. So we can add a method, okay? We can add a method. For instance, we can say def pay fee, for instance, pay fee. Then I can say print, okay, print paid, okay, this is print self dot name paid. Now this self, since I'm using self dot name, I must pass the self, sorry, I must pass the self in here so that I can be able to access it here. Okay, so if I run this guy here, if I run person one dot pay fee, okay, so you see it says Jotam paid. Okay, I'm using this self now to access the properties of this class, of this object. Now let us understand some terminologies, okay? When we create variables inside our class, okay, outside it, we call it property. Like in this case, this name, which is a variable here, is a property of this object. Then if we create a function like pay fee in the class, outside it, when we create the object, we call it a method. Okay, we call it a method. So this is a method. Okay, we just put that as a method, and this is a property. Okay. Okay. Now, okay. So that is what we, okay, my just telling me that to end the next, I have just 10 minutes left. Okay, so the last thing we want to do for classes is we can actually create a class and use the string method, okay, to return a value for it. So like in this case now, when we use the string method, we can return the self using the string method, okay, so that I can get the person class. Let us take a look at this, for instance. Let me copy this guy again. Copy this guy again. Okay. Now, if I say print person one, for instance, person one, okay? This is what we get. Okay, I'm going to have something like this, person, object, and all of that. Okay, but if I have a string constructor, okay, like this, if I declare a string constructor like this, then I can actually print the person using the string constructor. Okay, so let's just quickly do that before our class ends. So I'm going to come here and add a string constructor. That is it there. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to say print return that return f self dot name, for instance. Okay, return self dot name. So now if I run this guy, you see it returns Jotam for me because of this code. Yeah. Okay. So if your assignment assignments class that includes persons the surname. Person's name and the person's name, surname, this is first name, rather, first name, surname, and the course. Okay, the course he or she is taking. Okay, okay. So I don't want to take too much time and cover too many topics. So, but I just want to cover it just a little bit so that we can be able to follow through. Okay. So we have about 5 minutes. Are there questions from anyone? Okay. So if there are no questions, then let me just do a recap of what we have done so far. Okay. Now, we started from functions. Wow, done a lot. We said we create functions as a block of code, which we can call on to run this code. So we created a simple function here called add numbers, and then we have this code under it. And take note of this indents, all of this code are under this function. And when we are calling a function, just type the function name, put the brackets after it. We also said that we can make users to input values inside the function. So that is just what we did. Here we put the variables and we assign values into it. But here we are able to ask the users to enter the numbers of their choice. So instead of having literals directly on the variables, users can actually type any number of their choice. We also said that functions can take in parameters. Like in this case, this function is taking the parameter n, and also functions can also return a value. Like in this case, this function is returning this value after it has checked if the number was successfully casted into a float. Next, we talked about passing what uh, we call arguments now. So we have these parameters here that comes with the function. We are creating it. And then when we want to call the function, pass the parameters into it. Please take note. If you do not put these values here while creating this, then you're going to have an error. But however, sometimes you may want to have an optional parameter. Okay? An optional parameter. For example, this operator, if you want it to be optional, I can say operator equals, let me just put this one. Let me just add something. Just add it here. Okay, I can say operator, I want it to be optional. If I say operator equals to plus, for instance. So here, I may not need to put this OP here. Okay? I may not need to put it. All right? It's optional. What that means is that when I run this guy, I enter a value, enter another value. Okay. Okay, let me just enter something, whatever. Just enter anything. Enter a value. So it gives me an output. What that means is that if I do not put if I do not put a value there, it's going to assume that I want to do addition. Okay, because I made this an optional parameter. Okay, that is for functions. And then we talked about classes. We created a class, a simple class we created with a variable called name, and they'll put a value to it. And they will say that any variable we create in a class is an object. Okay, and then also we said that we can use the init function to be able to use the constructor to create an object so that we can easily, create several objects from it. So we see with this example, we created Jotam and created Jane. I can also create a method or a function inside it that we can use to, carry out some functions inside the class. Finally, we talked about using the string constructor, the str constructor, which we used to be able to print a version of the object easily. If we do not have this, it will not be able to, determine what to do when we are trying to access a class itself. Okay. So please remember your assignment. Do a Python class that can output a person's first name, surname, and the course he or she is taking. Thank you for joining. I'm trying to keep it simple. We can always come and revisit our codes where we can, and of course, we can read up on W3 schools. Okay. Obviously, our next class will also be online. We'll talk about inheritance. Okay, and then we'll see how far we can go. So have a nice evening.